I chose not to have kids. I suppose it's not too late, but at this point, I'm probably most eligible as a stepdad who comes in after the children are grown. And I think I'd be a pretty good stepdad, like based on experiences with my own step parents. It all seems pretty easy. In some areas, a pretty low bar, actually. I've learned a few cases, though, of what. Why did I write that? Okay. Based on experiences with my own step parents, it's all seems pretty easy. In some areas, a pretty low bar. I've learned a few cases of what not to do. But generally speaking, it's not hugely likely that I'll ever have kids, and that's all on purpose. I salute parents everywhere. That shit looks so hard and so rewarding. A dear friend of mine just saw his daughter off to college last year. I remember when she was born. It's wild to look at this young woman, a fully formed adult human person with thoughts and ideas and a sense of humor, a sense of self, just out in the world, and she came from my friends. There's little more impressive to me on earth than successful parenting. Then why choose not to have kids? I mean, so many factors. One, it was never top priority for me or my partner of 20 years. We don't want kids if we're not fully committed to the idea. Two, we were both very busy. I was very busy. I didn't want to slow down my selfish pursuit of my own dreams to create a whole new person. And three, and probably most importantly, it's movies like this. Movies like Under the Shadow 2016, which depict a child as the most obstreperous, obstinate, obnoxious monster in the world. Parents out there are probably giggling at this thought, like, you think Dorset in this movie is bad? Oh dear, that's not the least of it. And that's why I don't deal well with irrationality. I can't function under relentless assaults by tiny people who haven't yet learned tact or logic or just a way to communicate exactly what they need. The There's a gimme, there's a no, there's an I want, there's a now. I've seen this behavior too much because it's totally normal childhood development, but it not terrifies me, though that's not far off. More like just turns me off. I don't want that job. I know the pay, the reward is immense, but I think I'd prefer nearly anything else than that. Hi, Cecil.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Did you have a favorite doll or toy growing up?
Oh, did I have a favorite doll? Let's see. I played with a lot of He-Man and G.I. Joes,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Star Wars action figures. But I think I did have a stuffed Pegasus
Mm.
growing up that did kind of go with me everywhere. Although it was misnamed and I named it Uni for unicorn, even though it was clearly not a unicorn, it was a Pegasus. But apparently that was the name that it was given.
Oh, it's very funny.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm so interested when I see a movie like this. I think about like reading Peanuts growing up, and you had Linus in his blanket.
Hmm.
That there's like a security blanket, a security toy, a thing that kids hold on to, and
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had that as a kid. Like I had stuffed animals, action figures, toys, cars, whatever, blankets even. But I don't
Mhm.
think I ever had anything where I'm like, no, I cannot leave the house without this object.
Yeah, me neither.
Mm-mm. I remember feeling like I had to, because I would see depictions of that, whether in the comic strips or whether in cartoons or TV shows where kids had an imaginary friend or they named their favorite animal or blanket or whatever. And so I remember I had a little stuffed dog that I had named Ralph. And so I had this whole thing of like trying to cosplay a kid who had like a security issue and needed to take Ralph everywhere, but I gave up on it so fast.
You forgot about Ralph.
I forgot about Ralph. I still have Ralph somewhere in my
Oh,
house.
that's nice.
That's very nice. So in some ways, I guess I didn't ever leave him behind. Um, this movie is not really about kids, although it's about a kid.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Uh, I saw this movie a couple years ago. It hits on a lot of lists if you're looking at best movies of any given year and horror movies of any given year, and this one kind of hits the top of most of the 2016 lists. It kind of fills the art house horror genre really, really
Sure.
well. Um, it starts with some placards, right? How much do you know about the Iran-Iraq War, Cecil?
Oh, apparently not enough.
No.
I was like, oh, okay, wait, we gotta read this. And we gotta deep down. Man, it just one of those things that makes you go, yes, I think I know a little bit about this. And then you start reading it and you're like, it went for 8 years. Oh, wow, I was not up to date on
No.
my current events of these years.
I think the kind of the first time I was really like getting invested in news, like regularly, like I'm going to watch the news and follow what's happening in the world, was when the US Iraq first US Iraq conflict happened in like
Sure.
1990, 91, somewhere around there, which would have been on the tail end of the Iran-Iraq war. And I know through latter years after the Bush administration, we have that famous photo of Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands in the 1980s with Saddam Hussein,
Yes.
which probably points to there is not stated in this film, but there's probably a huge amount of US involvement in arming the Iraqis to bomb Iran.
I mean that missile, that unexploded missile that goes through their house
Oh,
probably came from somewhere.
it was most likely probably created by Lockheed Martin or something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Uh-huh.
Weird coincidence that the Iran-Iraq war ran exactly through the Reagan administration from 1980 to 1988.
Odd coincidence there.
Uh-huh. So it says at the beginning that the Iran-Iraq war is the longest conventional war of the 20th century from 1980 to 1988.
I didn't know that.
No. And throughout the conflict, Iran underwent rapid internal political and cultural transition, a legacy of the bloody 1979 Iranian Revolution. So, if you've ever read, uh, the graphic novels Persepolis or seen the
Yeah.
movie
Mhm.
adaptation of it, that deals with the Iranian Revolution, the Cultural Revolution as well, that went along with that era in the 70s. So it is interesting that Iran, just coming off of this, is suddenly being attacked by their neighbor to the west.
Yes.
So that's where we're at, and then we get
Ooh, that's the setup.
war footage, opening credits, Under the Shadow.
Yep. Lots of grainy clips of Saddam Hussein and missile strikes and
Yeah.
ooh, here we go into a
Uh-huh.
war-torn country.
Yes. So we're gonna start at a university in Iran in Tehran. And we see both men and women. In fact, I think it's really interesting that it's women at the forefront in just kind of this B-roll shot of people
Yeah.
and students in a hallway. And one particular woman, Shide, is called into the office of advisor, a dean. I don't know what this guy is, but she's sort of pleading her case because she has been told she has done some bad things.
Yeah.
And the bad things turn out that during the revolution in the 1970s, she was on campus being part of a leftist student group.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
But she's tried to downplay it. She's like, I was young, I just wanted, like I was passionate, like all young people are passionate. And, I really just want to study medicine. That's all I want to do. It's
Uh-huh.
all my dream. My lifelong dream has ever been to study medicine. Can't we just, can't we just let it slide?
Yeah. I I had the question here of like, do I believe her in saying that like I remember that at a certain age before I realized the difference between left and right, I knew that there was left and right political arguing. But
Sure.
if you would have asked me at age 18, what does the left stand for and what does the right stand for? I'd have been like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I think I had a pretty good idea that, like, sort of at that age,
Uh-huh.
but it was probably much more based on like environmentalism, and it really had nothing to do with sort of economic politics and more to do with social politics,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the United States, at that time.
Yeah, of course. Also, like uh, also being gay, I would assume that
Oh
would
yeah,
like clicked in left and right very
I'm just
early
sort
in
of
your life.
pre-coded to fall into line with the left. Yeah, that's probably pretty true.
Yeah. But yeah, I sat there wondering sort of uh, maybe the question isn't whether or not she's telling the truth about how little she was invested in that student group, and so much so is just when you watch how far right, especially socially, how far right
Yeah,
socially Iran has moved at this point in the 1980s, that uh that in some ways you're having to sacrifice a bit of who you are and who you want to be in order to just survive in the world.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so I think she's just trying to move the goalposts a little bit, so that she's like, I'm willing to live in this world. Just you got to forgive me this. I'm happy to just like be a little bit less politically
Yeah.
active if you let me get my med degree.
And we certainly see that throughout the film in some of the, like, once we actually get into their home, the little things that they sort of continue to do in their life that you realize are big no-nos in the larger world outside that they sort of cover up when they're in the house.
Mm-hmm. The other thing to note is there's a view of her talking to this college professor dean guy, and it's a side view of them face to face, and there's a window in the backdrop, and you can see a cloud of smoke and then hear kind of like a distant boom.
Just like a and you see a missile land
Mm-hmm.
just a few miles away. They both
Terrifying.
go, well, back to business.
He tells her, you may not have known better, but it was an action, and actions have consequences. So you cannot continue your medical school. Just find a new goal in life.
Yikes. Yikes.
Here's the trinity of terrible men. We start with this one. She drives home crying.
Yeah.
She is stopped at a roadblock, a very scary man in olive drab and a big beard, kind of like stops and looks in her car and then waves her on. Um,
She's got like tears in her
mm,
eyes. She's like adjusting her like headscarf to make sure she looks appropriate to drive.
yeah,
Rough. Rough.
very rough. And then to complete the holy trinity of terrible men, we meet her husband, Iraj.
Is he terrible?
Well, I don't think he's terrible. I don't know that any of these men are terrible. They're all doing the thing that society tells them they have to do. You know, the man whose roadblock stops her, I mean, that's
Yeah.
his job. He's got to do that. The professor guy is like, probably somebody above him is like, there are no leftists allowed in your
Yeah.
school. And the husband is part of the the Iranian patriarchy that's
Yeah.
come since the Cultural Revolution. The thing that I will say this, he does a terrible thing to her, which is when she tells him that I got kicked out of med school because of this thing that happens. He fucking blames her for it. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, well, you were the one involved. I mean, he says that a little bit later that, well, you were the one doing all the school stuff, you know, this political stuff. But in this moment, when she's at her most vulnerable and they're most connected, he says, well, maybe it's for the best.
Yeah. Yeah, to me it was the moment where he says that being a doctor wasn't your dream, it was your mother's dream
Mm.
for you. And she died, and that's the only reason why you're so upset about this. I was like, "What? Uh, okay. All right."
Yeah. Yeah, he just in this moment at the beginning, and this sets the tone for their relationship
Yeah.
throughout this movie because when he says it's probably for the best, that's what she hangs on to, you know,
Yeah.
this idea that, you know, can't you just be with me here rather than trying to
Do your own
talk?
thing.
Yeah, like it's the thing of like, don't be sad. Like, no, I
Yeah.
am sad. It's not a
Yeah.
thing I turn off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you could tell, oh my gosh, throughout this movie, especially the first act of this movie you watched today, just desperately try to squeeze her life and personality into the sort of merry homemaker,
Hmm.
stay at home. And it's like, listen, the amount of time she just takes glasses out of the cabinet and then puts them right back in. I was like,
Yes.
this woman is going bonkers bananas out of boredom.
Yeah. Yeah, boredom and I think this movie is addressing, you know, in an art house horror, the horror is always it could be real, but it also represents something
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
truly real in the world.
Yeah.
And so in this way, the horror in this the scary supernatural horror in this movie is in the real world is probably PTSD, you
Yeah.
know, from
Oh,
living in a war
absolutely.
zone. Yeah, she's and that kind of goes to the thing where you're just when you live in a world where the government, where the rule of law hates you for being a woman,
Hmm.
uh, you are having to find compromises because you know you can't overturn all of it at once
Right.
for risking your life. So you say, well, I want something in life. How much am I willing to get
Yeah.
out of the system and what they will give me?
Yeah.
Being a homemaker is one of those compromises. So she uh she chucks all of her medical texts,
Yep. Except one.
hmm which was inscribed by her mother. It was like an anatomy textbook. And it's just mom wrote in the inscribed the inside saying, I'm so proud of you for becoming a doctor. Love you,
Oof.
mom.
And she
God
throws
damn.
everything else away. She's like, give them away. I don't, I'm done. I'm done
Yeah.
with all this. But
And
she takes that one textbook and she locks it away in her special drawer. She gets one drawer in this house that
yep.
is just for her.
Yeah. Yeah, she has a really beautiful key that locks the bottom drawer of this desk where she keeps this book. And it's so telling when she goes to the bookshelf across the room. She raises her arm up and sets it on top of the very top of the bookshelf. And
Yeah,
that's right when Iraj enters the room and you see his eyes catch her hand up there.
of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, we also meet in this moment, we also meet Mrs. Fakur, who is one of the neighbors.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, and that's one of the really interesting, cool visual things as the movie goes on is this building is semi-full with people. You imagine there's probably like 6 to 10 units in this building,
Yeah,
and we see all the different neighbors. There's lots of people. There's whatever, and as the movie goes on, there are fewer and fewer people in
yeah.
this building. But Mrs. Fakura is one, and Mrs. Fakura is I think
She's one of the cool ones.
she is one of the cool ones.
Like she's watching Dorsa while Shade is off at this last ditch attempt to regain reentry to medical school. She gives Shade some like some a shoulder to cry on essentially
Uh,
when she says no, it didn't work out.
she says, "Yeah, it's the climate right now. Just don't
Yeah.
let it change you," which
Yeah.
is a very nice thing to say. It's as nice as you can really say because you can't really fix anything.
Yeah.
Um, so we get to this point where the husband is like, it's probably for the best, fuck this guy. Well, the air raid sirens go off, the power is cut to the building. They all have to run down into the basement. Um, Dorsa has to find Kimia, her little dolly.
Oh, this doll.
Fucking doll, man.
Jeffrey, the amount of time we spend trying to find this doll in this movie.
Hmm.
This is I totally get your intro. I'm like this kid,
Yeah,
this doll.
no.
There's like air raids going off, bombs are exploding, and the doll's like, my doll, my doll. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay,
Yeah. Um, I I think this is such a smart movie. It has some really good scares. I am kind of getting to the point though where like as I write content warnings in the show notes for people for horror squeamishness, I've become so comfortable around horror movies that actually the content warnings I want are annoying tropes.
yeah,
And the two annoying tropes in this movie is the main character, Shade, does not ever believe in the evil that's happening.
yes. It takes her so long, Jeffrey.
She
It
has
takes
to
her
like
so long. She has to be like hit on the head and like grabbed out of bed and flung around the room before she's like, I think something is wrong here.
she doesn't actually believe it until even after she sees it, she still
Yeah,
doesn't believe it.
yeah,
Um, even after it attacks her, she still doesn't believe it. And that there's that, and then also just the annoying child, because we can sort of expect a child to have irrational behavior, but it becomes so repetitive to the point where I, as a viewer, I'm like, honestly, I love you, baby girl. You're the best in the whole world, but get in the fucking car.
yeah,
We
yeah,
are we are driving we are driving away. We are driving to Albany now.
yeah,
And,
yeah. Like I will, you know what? Maybe your dolly has a sister who will find down the road.
uh-huh. Yep. But I think I think the pretense of the movie is that it starts with, oh, I want my doll,
Yes.
and actually it is the djinn who has come in on the winds, maybe through the boy that we'll meet in a second, um,
Yeah.
that that has started to possess her in that way. Um,
Oh, to make her more
mhm,
insistent.
yes,
It's like echoes of the Babadook here. Like it
yes,
definitely has that. Like, is this just a kid being a kid, or is this a kid under the forces of crazy, malevolent evil? Is it just a kid who's just trying to do their kid thing,
yeah,
but under unusual circumstances? Is it the war torn nature of, just the landscape that they're living in?
yeah,
Not that they're living a war torn landscape in the Babadook, but
right, right. So they're down in everyone goes down into the basement of the building, so it's a semi-crowded type of basement space. And
I like these scenes a lot. These I
I
think
do
are some of the
too.
most effective scenes, kind of the to sort of not just tell the main character's story, but to tell the story of the bigger picture story. So
Hmm.
the fact, like you said, we have, it's kind of a full basement. We kind of meet, we don't even meet all the neighbors, but we see all the neighbors. And then the next time we go down, there's kind of the big boom, the false explosion, and there's a few less, and
Uh-huh.
then everybody's like, we're getting out of here, and then a few less until we get to the very last scene, and when it's literally just the two of them are the only ones down there,
Yeah.
and that to me was some of the most haunting horror of the film, which is, I think important to talk about. Like so many times horror movies come up in, like there's a vampire on the loose, there's a werewolf, there's a ghost, but trying to wrap your brain around a horror film set within something something real world terrifying
Uh-huh.
is really interesting. Like for instance, we covered His House on Patreon, which is as another movie that I think even more explicitly puts its finger on. I think one of the characters even says, like, after the horrors we've seen humans enact upon each other, what do you think? I'm afraid of a few bumps in the night and a few ghosts.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a very valid point.
Actually, that's such a great thing to bring up because because Rial in his house says that about she says that about these, you think I'm afraid of a few bumps in the
Yeah.
night after the wars that I've seen. And it's sort of interesting with Shade in this movie. She's almost like defiantly unafraid of the warfare happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's her husband, I think when he says that to her, it's probably for the best. It's not just that that's just a really insensitive thing to say to somebody, but also it probably is the piling on of every person in the culture, in the
Yeah.
misogynist culture of this, the new rule
Yeah.
In Iran, that at this point she's like, honestly, given all that, I'm not afraid of your missiles. I'm not afraid of
Yeah.
your bullets. I'm not afraid of your drones.
Yeah.
I am I am fighting for myself. And
Hmm.
so staying here is what I will do because that's how
It's
I will stand up to my biggest fear, which is the misogynist rule that I live
it's
under.
like the one choice that I can make.
Uh-huh.
The one choice that I'm allowed to make by myself.
Yeah. So in the basement, we see Shade clocks a new kid. There's like
Hmm.
another boy in there. And there's a moment where he goes to Dorsa and he whispers something in her ear and then he hands her something. We find out later that what he handed her is a magical ball of cat fur.
Yeah. I assumed it was like a bezoar,
Uh-huh.
which is a pretty, pretty traditional magical item, but that kind of same.
Okay,
I thought
sure.
it was a rock at first. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, he just gave her a rock of some kind.
But Dorset clarifies later that it was a magical ball of cat fur,
Cat fur. Oh,
which tickles me a lot. I think that's very, very funny. Um, and then, Shade, there's a moment where you see her kind of turning to Mrs. Fakur saying, like, who's the new kid? Like, what's
yeah,
his
yeah,
fucking
yeah,
thing?
yeah.
And she like gets Dorset away from him as well.
Yes.
And as we learn, everyone is kind of creeped out by the new kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Fakur says he lost his parents in the war.
Yeah. So he's like a refugee from another part of the country he's like a cousin that's being taken in by their downstairs neighbors.
Yeah, the Ibrahimis,
Yeah.
who are also the landlords of the building
Yes.
too.
And the Ibrahimis, I think, are a lovely kind of a foil to Mrs. Fakur. You know, if
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Fakur is the like, like we're the down low liberal at home, we can kind of Mrs. Ibrahimi is the like Mr. and Mrs. Ibrahimi are they're the ones who are socially a little bit more right, let's say. Like they don't seem happy about any of this, but they're definitely mind your P's and Q's around the Ibrahimis because
Yeah.
they're probably the first ones going to turn informant.
Yes. It's so wild to me, like how much this is on the almost the other side of the earth from where we live, and how it is an entirely different religion than
Mm-hmm.
Christianity
Yeah,
in so many ways. Culturally, where this is in the world, so many
sure.
different, it's a different language, different whatever,
Different landscape. Yeah,
different
yeah.
landscape, everything, and how it's all the exact same.
It's the same, man. Humans are kind
You
of
could
this. Humans
you
are kind
could
of same,
remake,
same.
yeah.
You
Um,
know,
the one big,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, we are. It's we love our Bibles or Qurans in this
Mm-hmm.
case.
And we love, when we have to sort of bump up against other people that live life in their own way, that maybe we take our aggressions out on them and oh my God,
Hmm.
the scene with Iraj and Mr. Ibrahimi where they're like, your wife needs to lock the door properly. And he's like, well, you and I, we're men, so we clearly know how to close the garage door. And your wife is the only woman who can drive, so it's got to be her.
Yep.
I was like, this fucking guy.
Did you notice? And it wasn't at the garage door, but it's at the front outer gate of the
Yeah.
building. There's two scenes, one where Iraj leaves and one where Mr. Fakur leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And we see them out the front window, and it's the exact same gate as the one on the garage. You see when they leave, they just kind of like half close the gate and walk off. They never latch it like Mr. Ibrahimi says.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Both of them just kind of close the gate and walk out. It's never stated that that's what's happening,
Yeah.
but I found it really funny that Mr. Ibrahimi was so much like, these bolts have to go up. And when you see that front gate, it's the exact same gate that's on the
And
back
they
garage,
themselves are the ones doing
who are
the.
just kind of like half
Mm-hmm.
closing it and getting in their car and walking,
Isn't
driving
that
off.
the way?
Mm-hmm. So, Dorsa's having bad dreams. She says she's hearing something walking in the house.
Uh-oh.
Iraj, I imagine, by the way, if you are say a divorced mother of a with a shitty ex, I imagine this is maybe triggering to you of just watching how much kind of a dick Iraj is to Shade in this movie, and how much Dorsa loves him. The
Yeah.
idea that mom does all of this
Yeah.
work, mom halts college, mom does this, mom halts dreams, says, I will raise this child, does all the work to raise the child. Iraj is never there because he's shipped off playing
Yeah.
doctor, as she
Yeah.
says later. And here's Kimia being like, Daddy, don't leave. I love you so
I
much.
know. Yeah.
Um, but he is being called into service. He is a doctor, and this is wartime. And he's going to be sent off to Elam, which is apparently where the center of fighting currently is.
Yeah. And he
Mm-mm.
keeps saying, he's like, maybe I'll get a more quiet post like last time. So this is clearly not the first time this has happened, but it is not the case this time. Seems the situation seems pretty dire,
Yeah.
especially with like, and we feel throughout these opening scenes the sort of Tehran is being targeted in
Hmm.
order to give everybody's like, we're getting out of here
Yeah.
in their own special ways, in their own unique ways. Like kind of what is the last straw, which is something that I think about a lot.
Yeah.
In like if in your life, if you notice the contemporary political, cultural, military landscape changing around you, what would be that final straw
Yeah.
that you say personally, this is it? I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And for everybody, it's different. And, depending on your situation. But I think about that a lot when I watch movies like this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And whether, I started thinking about just the idea of living in a war zone and what that kind of looks like. And
Yeah.
this movie is, I think, a really interesting way of looking at that, like placing you inside the war zone, but it's not a war movie. Like
Yeah.
it's a looming thing. You are under the shadow of the war,
Sure.
but and the missile that lands on the building that does not ignite, that doesn't
Yeah.
explode, is a really terrifying visual.
Yeah.
But I also couldn't help but to think like what it would be like being in a city like New York, where I can look out my window, see lots of other buildings. If I saw an explosion in the distance and then chose, well, I know they're definitely targeting Queens right now,
Yeah.
so I think I'm okay here.
Like I don't live next to a power plant. I don't live next to a military base. I don't live
Yeah.
next to. I remember that was so. I grew up in East Tennessee, and I remember having a very vivid thought that Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is where like a lot of the nuclear war development was going on, like that was a major target, and that was like a thing in my young consciousness of like, oh my gosh, if we
Yeah.
in the Cold War, if we go into if it's some sort of Cold War attack for whatever reason, Oak Ridge was going to be a target
Mm-hmm.
right up there with New York, California, New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. Um, clearly, maybe
Yeah.
a little more. But that was my childhood fear, was that it was so close to where I lived.
Yeah. And it's funny because we kind of naturally think that if people were to attack the United States, that they would go after New York or Los Angeles. Um, but it's most likely that they would go after places like Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
They would go after actually the military centers. They'd
It's
go after,
military bases and infrastructure.
yeah, San Diego, Virginia Beach, wherever.
Yeah.
Like, where's the place in Arkansas where we have the ICBM launchers or whatever? Like places like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So Iraj wants Shade to go up north to. He's like, I want you to go
Go stay with my
at my
parents.
family's
Yeah.
house. Boy, this is.
Oh
Whew.
my God. I kept thinking what she says then. She's like, every time I go up there, your family hates it.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, no, they don't hate you. She's like, your sisters literally said when bombs go off in Tehran, we feel the shrapnel up here.
Yes.
I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay. All right. In-laws.
her sis
In-laws are hard.
her sister sounds like the worst person in the world, but also somebody that I would just maybe one of the most fun people in the
I know,
world.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they get into this fight, and I think this is such a well-written domestic argument
Yeah.
because it's so good at neither of them are arguing the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Because what she's mad about is that he said it's for the best. But she doesn't say that. She drops a hint at that later when she's like, well, maybe it's for the best that you go
Sure.
off to war. Like she's calling back out, but he is taking this as, oh, you're mad that now you can't practice, but I get to practice. So you're jealous of me and you're
Yeah.
taking it out on me. And it's like, nope.
No.
Um, yeah, it's my fault you can't finish your studies. Like you're blaming me for your inability when to do this when it was your fault because you did this politics thing.
Yeah.
And then gets to the line you mentioned, you're being a doctor is not your dream, it's your mother's. And she's like, the dead can't dream.
Oof. Oof.
Oh. He even tells Dorsa as he's hugging her goodbye, Mom's going to take you to Granny's.
Yeah.
And then also this just the weight of this image of him with an envelope of cash handing it to her,
Right.
that the man controls the money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so she's all alone. She's determined to stay here. She's not
Yeah.
gonna go hang out with that shitty family. Yeah.
Before he goes, in talking about sort of the under the shadow, under the specter of war, it's the repairs, the tape on the window becomes a recurring theme in
Yeah.
Shade's mind of letting bad things into her house.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that, this falls under Iraj's territory. Like some of the tape sort of peels off in the night,
Uh-huh.
and she's like, the tape peeled off again. And clearly, this is something that either gender could probably attend to, but
Uh-huh.
she's like, well, this is under your jurisdiction
Yeah.
of keeping the family safe, so you got to retape the windows. And it kind of turns into, he's like, I'll get to it later.
Hmm. Um, yeah, man, the Windows thing, the window tape, because that makes me think of like uh if you live in a hurricane area
Yeah.
or like heavy tornado area, if you're expecting, tape up on the windows to
Yeah.
minimize that shatter effect.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Shade is starting to see Dorsa's nighttime behavior get worse, right? Like
Yeah.
she's having more and more bad dreams. She wets the bed in the
Yeah.
middle of the night. She's afraid to go to the bathroom alone. Um, she Shade, in talking to her to figure out what she's scared of, Dorsa mentions the Jinn, Djinn, the Jinn, which is a possessing demon, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Not the wish granting variety.
right. Yes, not the genie, the
It's
Jinn.
more the, spirit that lives on the wind that is real mad at humans
Uh-huh.
or something.
And and she, Shade is like, where did you learn about, like, Jinn aren't real? Like, where did
Yeah.
you learn this? And she was like, Mehdi, the boy,
Uh-huh.
he told me all about it.
She's like, okay, well, now I gotta go talk to these downstairs neighbors.
Gotta go talk to Mrs. Ibrahimi, who is taking in this boy. And I love this conversation. Because one, we get the reveal when she says, hey, the boy you took in, your cousin,
Hmm.
your kid's cousin, he's been telling these creepy stories to my daughter. And listen, kids will be kids. I'm not mad.
Yeah.
My daughter's having a hard time sleeping. She gets really rattled. Can you ask him to stop, please? And Mrs. Ibrahimi says, what?
Miss Ibrahimi says, well, you must be mistaken because that boy has not spoken a single word to anyone since he got here.
Mm-hmm.
Completely mute. So you must be thinking of something else. She's like, what? What? She's telling stories to Dorsa about Jinn, and Miss Ibrahim is like, oh, Jinn are real.
Super real.
Oh, that's absolutely. I was like, oh, okay, all right. We got some fundamental,
Uh-huh. They're
some
in the
some sort of,
Quran and everything.
yeah.
I
Okay,
do.
all right. Sorry to bother you. Gotta go upstairs. Goodbye.
I love that as a good like folk horror trope, as in
Yeah,
like when you think like, oh well, oh I learned about this place because there was an old man with a red hat and a cane out standing out there, and like he told me how to get to this old inn, and they're like,
yeah.
oh,
There
that's
was
Mr.
never a red.
Johnstone.
Oh, yeah.
He died 20 years ago on
I
a
know.
night
Yes,
just like
yes, yes.
tonight.
And
um
I'm a fundamentalist religious, so of course I believe in spirits and ghosts and things that
they're
are
in the
in the
Bible.
Bible. They're in the
Uh-huh.
Bible. So naturally, yeah. That's news.
I mean, I think my favorite part though is the revelation that Mrs. Ibrahimi tells Shade. Uh, I will admit though, that boy is creeping us all out.
I know, right?
Like he is. I think she literally says creepy
Yeah,
according to the
yeah.
translation.
Like my husband gets mad at me when I say this, but he is creepy. Which is interesting because we have watched Shade watch kind of all the kids play together, and as kids, they all seem it's all laughy and happy.
Uh-huh.
So like clearly he doesn't creep out the other kids, and we know that Dorsa kind of they have like a little understanding, and we have seen him whisper something to Dorsa, so we know that maybe Mrs. Ibrahimi is this whole he's not spoken a single word, maybe just not to adults,
Yeah.
so there's definitely it's that sort of game of telephone that happens where we the viewer are getting certain information, and then we're hearing in other different versions of the story sort of a Rashomon effect here
Yeah.
of which I find really interesting and pretty accurate to how small communities work and how fear can spread and misinformation can spread. You're like, well, I don't think my daughter would just make up that he told her this. That seems odd.
Yeah.
But okay, now I got to go back and figure out what's going on inside my 8-year old's head.
Uh-huh. We're gonna learn to. Oh, he also one of the thing that Dorsa says that he whispered in her ear is they are coming.
Yikes.
So I think there's some read on this child as maybe the person who brought the djinn in, but I think he's
Yeah.
more of the harbinger.
Yes, I agree.
I think he understood from what he saw in
Yeah.
the war.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If we say that the djinn are representative of the traumas of war,
Right.
that the way that the djinn haunts you is the way that PTSD will haunt a
Yeah.
person.
And he
He's the
literally
one.
and he literally has a touchstone that I think is what got him through.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in some ways he is the harbinger of what's there, and we'll get some pretty creepy spoken imagery, and then actually an image of like a person like staring in horror at whatever that demon is.
Eek.
Another great, I do love this as a horror device, is the broken up phone call, the
Oh
disembodied
yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
Um, and we see this. Actually, this is a really great scene because it's got the horror element of her husband calling because he's all, just their relationship is so fraught.
He's like, "Why are
Also,
you still there?
yeah,
Why are you not at my parents?"
yeah,
I'm going to call my parents and have them formally invite you. That'll solve it.
yes. Um, the and then also we watch Shade go from like having cute tea party with Dorsa and the dolls
Yes.
to really starting to get a little freaked out by what's happening in the war, and she's trying to listen to the news to figure out whether her husband is safe,
Yeah.
whether she's going to be safe.
And it's not just the news, it's the English language news, it's the Western news.
Yeah, that's right. It's the BBC.
Like there's certain, like you can tell that their household is, clearly she's, she had sort of like political leanings when she was younger. She's studying to be a doctor. She can drive. The VHS, the fact that they have a VHS tape
It's
player
just is secret.
is secret. The fact that she's like has to listen in secret to a different radio to see if she can pick up any kind of news that is not sort of the state sponsored,
Hmm.
political coded, whatever version, is going on in the country, the like what you're supposed to hear.
Hmm.
And it's really funny that is when Dorsa, that to me is when Dorsa's like, it's still playtime. And she's trying to listen. That's when I was like, okay, this child is,
Hmm.
we need to have a little talk about priorities here.
um this child is a lot. Is a lot. And it is not to forgive Shade's behavior because Shade is having a very hard time balancing everything.
Yeah.
Understandably so. But with Dorsa kind of shoving the doll in her face, being like, "La, la, 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 la," and
Yeah.
she snaps, like slaps the doll away,
Yeah.
and then yells at Dorsa, saying, "Next time, I will take that doll away from you, child, if you do not listen to me." And it's so bad that
Uh-oh.
Dorsa crawls under the couch.
Yeah.
Again, I am no expert on parenting, but I think if you have raised your voice enough to where the child hides under the couch, you may need to dial it back just a little. I know this is hard.
I mean, it's interesting to me that no time do we ever see Shade or Iraj talk with Dorsa about kind of the bigger
Yeah.
picture,
Yeah.
you know?
It's a great
Like
point.
like and this is a parenting thing that maybe I just don't understand, not being a child, not being a parent of a child at this age. The idea of like there's a time when, you want your child to feel safe and happy and secure, but I think your child also needs to understand when the sirens go off,
Mm-hmm.
it's not time to look for your doll.
Mm-mm.
We will look for your doll later.
Mm-hmm.
It's not time to play tea time when mom's trying to get updates on whether your house is going to get bombed.
Yeah.
Like when adult time has to take precedence over kid imagination time.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this is an impossible ask. Maybe this is, for all you parents out there are probably going, "Oh, Cecil, oh, you sweet, innocent, foolish person." But in this movie, I'm like, listen, we need to sit down and talk with Dorsa about some priorities here.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
like, or maybe just like tie a string around that doll and tie that string to that girl's neck. If that is so important to you, you don't need to be leaving that shit around. You want that doll to stick with you, and it's going to stick with you always.
Yeah, it does seem to me that you could probably make a pretty rational argument to say, like, yeah, when the air raid sirens go off, we don't look for anything.
Yeah.
So if your doll is very important to you, keep her by your side at all times.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think some of that is just the frustrating nature of the script writing here, which is we
Yes.
need the functionality of this child to be so
Yes.
demanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a really hard time feeling the stakes of the doll is missing
Yeah.
as the movie went along. But I get what's happening, what they're going for. And
Yeah.
also, I do think some of it is they're using it in an interesting way, just like when Mrs. Ibrahimi points out, no, that child hasn't spoken since his
Hmm.
parents died in the air raid. My thought was, why do you immediately go to no, he is mute and not go to your question, Cecil, that you had in that when we talked about that moment is, wait, did he say something to your daughter?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting that he found comfort in talking to a child.
Yeah. 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 Like what? That's
Um,
impossible.
right. Yeah. She believes that this child, she's so like conservative, hard and fast. This is just how things are that she doesn't stop to really think about ways in
Maybe
which
there's
things
something
could
that,
change, be
yeah,
better.
maybe there's something outside of her point of view or worldview that could possibly even exist. I don't know.
And I think it all ties into PTSD if we say that's the realistic theme of this
Yeah.
horror film, that it's nobody's it's not like you can just fix PTSD,
No.
but there are ways in which you can be helped through it or help yourself through it. And nobody is really helping each other or themselves through
No.
any of the trauma happening in this movie.
You really feel that in this movie, like especially as the movie progresses, like the fact that there's the resources are dwindling. Just
Uh-huh.
life resources are dwindling. So if you're having extra hard times, like there's a fucking djinn in your house trying to kidnap your daughter,
Yeah.
everyone's gone.
Yep. Um, all right, so now we're gonna get to our next. We all have to get to the no, wait,
Yeah,
or
to
our
go
next
back to the
form of
basement.
chaos. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, actually, our next form of we don't get to the basement. What we get is the explosion because this is when the
Yes.
missile hits the building that they are in. It lands on the top of the building,
Yeah.
point first, and does not explode.
Yeah. This is kind
The
of an interesting. I think the editing in this, in a lot of these sequences, are actually one of my favorite things about this movie because it does a really smart job of sort of obfuscating what happens to who when. Like it
uh-huh.
really portrays, like Shade is trying to get Dorsa, Dorsa's trying to get the doll, they're trying to get to the basement. And, Shade is always one room ahead of Dorsa.
Uh-huh.
And she comes back into the room and an explosion has happened, but Dorsa's just lying on the ground and things are kind of knocked around. Her window is, like the living room window, the window in question with the tape on it has been blown out. But Dorsa, like, there's nothing, she's not near anything that would knock her out.
Yes.
And so immediately my horror movie brain is like, ma'am, you got gin. Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. I think something supernatural is happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it it is that untrained eye, so not untrained eye, but like just in the moment you would see your child on the floor as the building shook, and of course you would
Yeah,
think my child was knocked out. Oh my God,
yeah.
come to, you're gonna be okay. Um,
But
but
when
yeah,
but when it comes down to what did you really see?
uh-huh, nothing.
Yeah.
You didn't see shit.
We get a very similar thing when we get into the upstairs neighbors, this poor man,
Mm-hmm.
and his story.
Yeah, so upstairs there's a woman lives with her father. The family lives up there, and then the older father is that the missile crashed into their living room.
Yeah,
Like it is pointing at the floor in front of him in his easy chair.
yeah,
And this woman comes down to Shade's apartment. She's like, "You're a doctor, please help him." She's like, "I'm
yeah.
not actually a doctor." She's like, "Close enough, let's
Close
go."
enough, right? Yeah.
So in the chaos, she gets her up there and she performs CPR on this man, but nothing works.
No.
He's gone. Um, EMTs and ambulances show up. Shade's beating herself up, saying like if I was a real doctor, maybe he'd still be alive, which is not a helpful thought to have,
No.
Shade.
Yeah.
Um, and then we see, I think, such a haunting visual is the crane removing
Yeah.
the missile from the top of the building,
Yeah.
and then the men come up there and staple the tarp over the hole in that apartment.
Uh-oh.
Also, I think a really beautiful scene later that that neighbor comes to Shade's place and gives her flowers, and it's just
Yeah.
like, we're leaving,
Yeah.
and I wanted to thank you for what you did. And she's like,
Yeah.
he died. And she's like, listen, I don't think it was the missile what killed him.
Yeah. Because she says, he was talking to me
After the missile hit.
after the missile hit. The missile came down. He was talking to me. I turned around. No, he was staring at something just over my shoulder.
Uh-huh.
And then he died of fright.
Yes.
Now, Shade,
Uh-huh.
baby girl,
Uh-huh.
girl. This is not the time to be like, well, people see all sorts of crazy things when they're in stressful situations. No,
No.
no. This is where I was like, Shade,
This is along the line.
you need to listen, listen to what people are telling. Like, this is where I think this is the ultimate flaw of this movie is Shade's takes 5 ever
Uh-huh.
to realize she is under attack from something other than, an oppressive regime and missiles.
Yeah.
And I think that was my frustration, almost as much as my frustration of Dorsa trying to find this goddamn doll.
Yeah.
Almost. But it's that thing of, if creepy shit is going on in your life, if unexplained shit, you're just like, oh, I used to sleepwalk a few years ago. It only happened once or twice. And now all of a sudden my dreams are so violent that I'm having waking dreams. My daughter is having waking dreams. And the downstairs or the upstairs neighbor is like, yeah, there was some sort of creepy something up
Mm-hmm.
there that I can't explain that killed my father. And I'm convinced, girl,
Mm-hmm.
get out.
Yeah.
You in danger, girl.
Yeah.
Like, this is, and
There's
it's,
a
and I know, and I kind of, it's balanced with the, like, Shade is a doctor. She's very rational. She's,
mm-hmm.
very science,
Yeah.
but
This is where that kind of like speaking to like the genres, right? Like in the way we kind of like segment off genres and that horror, I think like romance is such a kind of a very specific genre for a very
yeah,
specific type of person.
yep,
And very often both horror and romance make their way into art house level films, like the
sure,
super smart literate. So it's like in a
sure,
bookstore, you have literature,
yes,
fiction, but then you have sci-fi, horror, romance,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
fantasy. And and this is a movie. So we, when we talk about like horror comedies, there are
yeah,
movies like Dead Snow, which is a horror movie with comedic elements. And then
sure,
there are movies like Tucker Dale versus Evil, which are comedies with horror elements.
sure,
This is an art house film
with
with
horror
horror
elements,
elements.
yes,
And I think the clear distinction is the fact that one of the things about genres, if you get into mystery, if you get into
hmm
horror, romance, there are very specific rules and tropes to kind of know
yeah,
in these. And I'm learning a lot about this and doing this with you, but it's stuff I kind of knew from reading a lot of horror novels too. But one of the big annoying horror tropes is the person who doesn't believe what's actually happening.
yeah,
And as
who literally can't believe their own eyes
and
until it's too late.
and we're in the 20 we're this movie, we're well into the 21st century at this point.
Yeah,
And so it is a very tired trope for the genre
yeah,
to have here, which it may not be that tired for art house film, right? Like that's
sure,
part of her character. She's repeating kind of she's saying a similar thing to this woman when she's like, listen, that what really happened was he had a heart attack because that's
yeah,
the logical. In the same way that her husband Iraj says to her, maybe it's for the best, meaning
exactly.
having a maybe it's for the best can be really good advice with the right timing.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
can
yeah.
be a
In the
true
right
statement
packaging.
in the
Yes.
right packaging. His was not the right packaging. And yeah, that's what's happening here.
Now here's my flaw with this film though, is that we kind of set up this is when she starts to maybe possibly get a little bit more curious about the
Uh-huh.
supernatural occurrences. And this is, we get our version of going to the library. She goes back down to ask Miss Ibrahimi, hey, oh no, no, sorry, Miss
Mrs.
Fakor.
Fakour, yeah.
This is like, hey, Miss Fakor, don't you have a book about gin on your shelf? She's like, oh yeah. Yeah, second that, hey, this is just an anthropological book. This is not something to really base your faith in. This is more of a myths, folk
Uh-huh.
tales kind of book. But we all know, listen, Miss Fakor, if you've seen what we've been seeing for the last 60 minutes, you would maybe readjust your views.
Yeah.
But what it says in that book is once the djinn takes something of yours, a personal possession,
Mm-hmm.
it can find you no matter where you go.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is like kind of the biggest, which is why when the movie ends where it does end, I was like, that's it. I had one of those moments where like the movie ended. I was like, wait, that's the end?
Mm-hmm.
Which is oftentimes a pretty typical art house reaction.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes art house films are really good at like throwing balls up in the air, but sometimes not catching them all the time. But I felt
Mm-hmm.
like this was a ball that was never caught. And it just sort of is hinted at, alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wanted to see it. I kind of want like I felt like it was an unanswered question.
Yes. I mean, it does feel like the ending of this movie is those because part of the doll and her religious textbook are still back at that place.
Her medical textbook.
Her
Yeah.
medical textbook, yeah. Sorry, yeah, medical textbook are back at the place that they left. That
Yeah.
the gin still has pieces of them,
Yes.
so it can always find them. It is in some ways that's kind of horror movie ish, which is the end, or
Yeah.
is it?
Or
This is
is
just
it? Exactly.
but this is the way art house movies do it. This is
Yeah.
not the way horror movies do it by
Classy.
having a hand come out of the grave and grab you,
Oh,
or
sure. But
um,
I kept waiting for them to finally leave this fucking terrible apartment building, which they should have done days prior, go to and then kind of I expected a second location, and I was not afforded a second location.
yes, yeah.
We in fact spent a lot of money on CGI fabric and mud.
Is exactly it. So, I think where the Shade stuff breaks down for me, or where I not breaks down, just I was getting really tired of it, which is that she is, she's continually like okay, for instance, she finds her Jane Fonda workout tape. We
Oh,
see her
Jane
doing the
Fonda,
Jane
which is
Fonda
clearly,
workout.
I love it because it's clearly not Jane Fonda, but I love that it's like Jane Fonda is just, it's aerobics is just
Hmm.
anything aerobics is Jane Fonda.
It's
I
totally
love
like
that.
you remember back in the 90s when you'd be in Times Square and early aughts, you'd be in Times Square and people would be selling DVDs
Yeah.
on the street of
Yeah.
films that were in the theater now that were most likely probably blank if you bought them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there is a thing where you're like, who knows how many times this has been copied over and
Yeah.
copied over
Over and over.
of a Jane Fonda knockoff from America and then
Yes.
called Jane. Anyways, she finds that tape like ripped open, like all of the tape has been pulled out of it and it's
In the
thrown in the
garbage can.
trash, and she's blaming Dorsa for this. And it's this like refusal to understand because Dorsa also is like, I cannot find Kimia.
Yeah.
I think she's upstairs in that apartment
Why would she
that
be
got
upset?
blasted.
Which I was like, why don't we go look for her then?
Just the distrust she sows with her daughter throughout
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's heartbreaking because you realize, like, from her own experiences in the life she's in the country she's in,
Yeah.
the culture she's in, and then in the war she's in, and probably just maybe who she is deep down. Like she is not able to reach her daughter. She's not able to find a way to bring her closer
Yeah.
to her.
Yeah.
And the Jinn is saying things to this girl like, she can't raise you. I can.
Oh my God.
Um,
what does this person look like? Well, it's a nice lady, and she just says she wants me to go with her.
yeah. And her Yeah, and her response is to lash out at her child rather
Yeah.
than draw her child closer. Um, there's a moment where I want to say one thing that's really, I think, really fascinating about this movie because this kind of goes in the opposite direction of how a lot of horror movies, especially art house horror, seem
Sure.
to work for me, which is usually my experience, like take the Haunting of Hill House TV series.
Okay, sure.
Scary up front.
Yeah.
And as it goes on, less scary. His
Yes.
house, similar, scary up
Yes.
front,
Yep.
less scary as we start to understand
Yeah.
what the thing is. I think this movie gets scarier as it goes
Oh, yeah.
on. I think the horrors of it, like they ramp up. It is a
Yeah,
slow
yeah, yeah.
burn.
Yeah.
And we get one of those wherein Shade wakes up in bed and we hear Raj's voice and we
Oh, we
see a
see,
man
yeah, we see
in
his
bed.
back. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
She goes, "Wait, what are you doing here? This is impossible."
He has this he kind of like lets her have it about being a bad mother and whatever else. It's very
Yeah.
clearly this is the Jinn, and she tries to pull the sheets off of him to see him, but again, he's all back and back of head, like we never
Yeah.
see his full thing. The sheets curl up around him, and then the sheets attack her.
Yeah.
It's a
Eek.
really
Eek.
good monster.
Yeah. But again, it's like if it's getting to like, but then again, who knows? It's like your life is so chaotic just trying to live day to day
Uh
that
huh.
this, you what you swear is a normal dream, even though it feels like a waking dream. Who's not to say that it's not PTSD? And that's where the horror of this film, that's where as much as we're like, listen, girl, you got to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a lobster in a pot and the temperature's being turned up 1 degree at a time, what's the jumping point? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because that
It
would have been it for me. Having
it's
ultra realistic dreams in which your husband who's not there attacks you, and I'd be like, you know what, Dorsa, we got to go.
yeah.
We got to go.
It's so wild though, because she calls Mr. and Mrs. Fakura over to her apartment to like scan the place, to look under the
Yeah,
bed, to like
yeah,
as if she had a home intruder
right.
and not not a lucid
Yeah,
dream, but like a tangible
yeah, yeah, yeah.
dream. You know, her husband even says at the beginning, when you get stressed, you sleepwalk.
Yep.
And sleepwalking is not just about walking in your sleep, it's about your body not being able to turn off itself while it's dreaming.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
you start walking, moving through the motions of your dream.
yeah.
And that's scientifically, if we want to be like Shade and explain away what just happened here, that's what just happened here. She had a very tangible dream. Um, but it makes me crazy that she's still like yelling at her daughter of like, you stole my Jane
I
Fonda
know.
tape.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
um Dorsa at one point in time is like running up the stairs screaming to try and get into that apartment
yep.
where the missile had hit because she believes that's where Kimia, the doll, had managed to get to. And Mrs. Ibrahimi actually like sees this happening.
Again, very much like living in a police state in which your neighbors are your informants
Uh-huh.
is horrifying to me.
Yeah.
So like even just having a dog, so now she has to go do damage control downstairs with Mrs. Ibrahim. She's like, I'm really sorry about my daughter running, please don't report us, or,
Yeah.
like that to me is the true horror here.
Well, actually it's really interesting that what Shade does is she takes the money that her
Yeah.
husband left her to be like, well, now I'll go pay our rent
Yeah.
for the time that we're going to leave, which is maybe a gesture of we should leave, but
Yeah.
also a gesture of just know we're good for it. We're
Yes.
good
Yeah.
residents. And she tries to slide it under her door, but Mrs. Ibrahimi opens the door.
And you can see the look on her face. She's like, fuck, now I gotta go in for tea. I gotta have tea with this woman. God damn it. And their apartment is correct. Like
Yes.
you can feel the conservative energy just radiating. Like this is this is being invited to church lady's apartment. Everything is like plastic on the couch,
Uh-huh.
like, and Shade is definitely like minding her P's and Q. Oh, look, God, thank you for this tea. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. I'm so sorry for my daughter. She's been sick. You know how kids are.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
It's so interesting because she's going to have a couple of these conversations with people. She's going to have this one with Mrs. Ibrahimi, who is conservative and religious.
Yeah,
She's also going to have a conversation with the pediatrician, who is
yeah,
a doctor,
yeah.
medically minded,
And also knew
scientifically
her,
minded.
and also knew her back in her student days.
Yes. And both of them have two very different answers. And to both of them, Shade is a little bit like, you know how it is. It's fine. We're all fine. She's trying to do
Yeah,
that. But Mrs. Ibrahimi is having none of it.
yeah,
Mrs. Ibrahimi is very much like, do you I your daughter knows something is up there. She's
yeah,
being called by something, something is
yeah.
moving, and she says, the jinn travel on the wind looking for someone to possess. And if they take a personal treasure of yours, if they have one of her personal treasures, you're marked and they will always know how to find you.
Now, it's just too many coincidences for my book. You know,
Yeah.
like even if it's coming from your creepy conservative neighbor, listen, if the math checks out,
Yeah.
you have something inexplicably go missing that your daughter is literally worried sick trying to, and she's like got a constant fever that I can't explain medically. The math checks out, girl.
Yeah.
Excuse me, ma'am. You've got gin. You call the Ghostbusters.
It's unbelievable. Um,
But I do like I love the acting in this movie, especially from the actress who plays Shade is like pretty fucking tops
yeah.
because she you could tell that she's like I nope. Is it like I think that she kind of reaches something is said and she's like, you know what? And she drinks the entire tea in like one cup. She's like, I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is done.
Yeah. So, yeah, and the doctor is saying things that would be very similar to what she would say if she
Yeah.
were able to look at
PTSD.
herself.
Very, you're like, listen, you seem stressed. Like your daughter, there's no like she's doesn't have a
Yeah.
fever. She's
Yeah. This
but
could.
there's other things in this world that can affect your body than maybe, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
staying in your apartment even though there's bombs going off every day.
Yeah.
Is there anything? How are you sleeping? How are
Mm-hmm.
you how's the home life?
Mm-hmm.
No? Fine. Everything's fine. You're super fine.
Yep.
Okay. All right. No follow-up questions.
Well, the Fakirs finally leave. Um,
And this is really sad
this
because I
is
love
very.
Mrs. Fakor. Like Mrs.
Yeah.
Fakor felt like an ally. Like she,
Yes.
also like seemed very, she has got books on the shelf.
Yeah.
She like, just the way that like, Shade doesn't have to wear her headscarf. Like they like seems like a liberal ally, like an auntie.
Yeah.
And so it's really sad. And Mrs. Fakor says, listen, I've got, my son is in Paris, I think. And,
Yeah.
he can't come and visit me because, well, they would fucking shoot him on sight. So maybe it's overdue for me to go. I've got a place to stay. My visa's stamped. I'm ready to go. There's no reason for me to stay here. And it's
Yeah.
just that sadness of like partings with
Yeah.
people, with communities, people that you actually do love in your community when you're like, it's like little Anatevka kind of fiddler
Uh-huh.
on the roof moment of like, I don't know, like, I don't know if we're ever going to see each other again, but thanks for being a friend,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's really sad. Like, Mr. Fakur's leaving at the crack of dawn, which also has a very like, not that she's escaping, but it has that feeling of kind of leaving under the cover of darkness
Yes.
to avoid problems at the checkpoints kind of vibe to it.
Uh-huh.
And they kind of give each other a sad wave goodbye. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is definitely very affecting.
It's very heart-wrenching. So, we're getting down to just really just Shade and Dorsa and the Ibrahimis
Yeah.
and Mehdi in that
Yeah.
apartment and in that building. And Shade is starting to have now we're starting to ramp up the crazy dreams. So she has a dream about loose tape on the window, and as she goes to
Oh yeah,
tape it
that's a
up,
pretty good jump scare.
it's a good double too, because the hand comes through quickly and then she wakes up
Yeah,
and then she sees the window.
it's
The tape is
normal.
fine. She goes to close the curtain and then sees like something whip by the window. And they're clearly on like the third floor
Yeah.
or second floor. Um,
This is when she starts getting like wake not just like waking dreams, but actual like hearing voices, movement in other footsteps in other rooms.
like a man in the apartment at one point in
Oh
time.
my God. Yeah, when that dude like just somehow like gets sucked up
Ceiling.
into the cracks in the ceiling. And Jeffrey, the next shot is of her getting out some fucking masking tape. I was like, girl, I don't think that masking tape is gonna keep out the gin.
No.
I don't say, and then the exact same thing when she's like, they find the doll and the doll's all torn up, and she's like, I'll fix the doll. And she gets out that masking tape. I'm like, girl, I
Uh-uh.
don't think that masking tape is gonna fix this.
Masking tape barely sticks to a wall when you're trying to
Right?
paint, let alone hold a fucking rag doll together or
Right.
a ceiling up that man, that is a
You've got a
150
demon ceiling.
pound man. Yeah.
You've got demon ceiling. Because the man, I'm like, the man is the dead, the man who died up there.
Yeah.
It's the old man who died, and he's naked. Listen, again, seeing naked people in your apartment when
Uh-huh.
you're not expecting them, pretty terrifying.
Uh-huh.
But seeing naked people being sucked up into the ceiling,
Yeah.
girl, masking tape ain't gonna fix that.
It sure is not.
You can't just tape the windows.
No. She has a moment driving home where coming back from the pediatrician with Kimia, I'm sorry, with Dorsa, and she sees Mehdi just like hanging out in the street.
Yeah,
It's
she's
like,
like,
"Do
"What
you
are you
need a
doing here, kid?"
ride?" He
Yeah.
nods, he gets in. As they're driving, you don't see his face, but you hear him say to her, "Where's her doll?"
Uh-oh.
Arrgh! You get
Follow the
out of my
clues. Come on,
car.
figure the clues out. It's
Uh-huh.
oh my God, so frustrating watching horror movies that I think you put it perfectly. They like sort of just enough horror for the art house crowd,
Mm-hmm.
but not enough horror for the horror crowd, which
Yes,
is kind of
yes.
where I felt with this movie. I was like, come on,
Yeah.
come on. This movie's so classy.
Yeah.
Can't we just make it scarier?
It's such a good movie. Like it's such an incredible film, but also just I want it to be I want it to dive into the horror more. Because when it does get to the horror, it's really good, but very brief.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I especially find the actual gin, with the fabric, the flow. I find that
What a
so
great, yeah.
creative. Yeah,
Yeah.
so good. Um,
Well, she
well, when
takes she takes the kid home, and the Ibrahims are out of here.
they're like, "Good, you found him. Get the fuck in the car, you idiot. Where you been?" Like,
Yeah,
let's go.
yeah,
And Shade gets upstairs with Dorsa and is like, "We're leaving too." But
yeah.
Dorsa, I have to have Kimmy, please, Mom. If I don't, I'll never get not sick. I'll stay sick forever if we don't find this doll. And I'm like, you know what you do? I think this is my guess.
What would you
If
do,
you're a
Jeffrey?
parent,
Because I'm going to tell you what I would do after you tell me. Okay.
um, if you're a parent, tell me if you think this is good or bad idea. But my thought here is surely there is some kind of like we got some medicine, like a Benadryl,
Oh
something
my
that like
God, I was
knocks the
literally going
kid
to say the
out.
same thing. I'm
And
like,
I'm
we're going
like,
to
here,
knock this
take
kid out.
this. This
Yep.
will this will help your
Here,
fever.
drink this orange juice.
When she
This
gets
with this
sleepy,
Nyquil in here.
you put her in the car, you take her upstate.
Yeah,
And then later you're like, I'm so sorry we tried to find it. We had to get out of there because the war was going to blow up our apartment.
yeah,
We were unsafe there. I'm so sorry, honey. You know what we'll do? Let's go with Granny and buy a new doll.
yeah.
And then we'll just kind of keep moving forward as best we can. And
This
then
is
you have
why.
and then that child is your grandmother and sister-in-law's problem, and they can be as cranky as they want. about you being there, being like, well, this is your granddaughter. You can help, can't you?
Yeah, yeah.
That was my
That's
thought. I don't know
exactly.
if you
I
had a
mean,
different.
that's yeah. No, I'd be like just 2 fingers of Jack Daniels or Benadryl
Uh
into their
huh.
orange juice. We gotta
Huh.
go.
Uh huh.
But no, 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 no. That's a terrible. No, that's terrible, terrible, terrible. And
Yeah.
also doesn't solve the problem of the gin.
No, but in the end, they didn't solve the problem with the gin at all. We just wasted a
No,
bunch of time looking for this fucking doll.
that's right. And they didn't even look for it. Like, oh my God. She just has like a manic episode in her child's room. She's like, okay, fine. The doll's missing. Here, let's look at all the places we've just looked and to make a big giant mess. As opposed to going upstairs where the girl is like, it's up there. You
Yeah.
know that room? You know that room where the guy died of fright?
Yeah.
Maybe it lives up there.
Yeah.
What you need is a crowbar. You need to get into that room. And I bet you the
Uh,
doll's there because your book is sure as hell there once you have your vision, your waking vision of your daughter having her eyeballs sucked out
yeah.
and,
You know what I bet no one will
fabric
notice?
lady sitting on top of your daughter.
You know what I bet no one will notice is just a broken front door on that
Right?
apartment.
Like
Given
fucking,
that there's a
yeah,
missile hole in the ceiling.
there's no one around. There's no one here.
That's right. Call the cops.
Call the cops. Well, no, don't call the cops
No, for
because
real.
we get that scene. That, which again, back to this idea of like, you know, making horror movies in larger societal structures that are even more horrifying. Like this gin is, hey, compared to the fact that the gin scares them out of their house one time
Yes.
and she grabs her daughter and she's like running down the street in terror and she gets picked up by the cops or by
Uh-huh.
the military police who say to her, what is this look? As in, like, what are you wearing? What are we in Switzerland? What is
Yeah.
this? What is this, the West? And they put her into jail.
Yeah.
And they were like, if like, it is unforgivable that you
Went
are
out without
seen
hair
out.
covering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Head covering.
And you're like, oh my God. And just how, like, there's no, and she doesn't, this is the tragedy of it. She doesn't try to explain because she knows it's falling on deaf ears. Like, there was a naked man in my house that got sucked up through the ceiling. I thought there was a burglar or some, like anything,
Yeah.
but to them, no excuse.
Yeah. And there's an older woman there that brings her clothing to put over herself and says, I will talk to the ward, the warden or whatever the guy's name is. And then this man in a suit comes in there and gray hair in a suit comes in there and
And
just
literally like finger
berates.
wags at her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like you this is the worst thing in society is when women go out without covering is basically like he literally says this is the worst
Yeah.
thing you can do.
It's like our men are dying.
They're martyring
They're
themselves.
martyring themselves, and you don't have the dignity to respect that about them.
You should be so ashamed. You're right. Like this is far scarier than anything that Jin could do. I'm like,
Right?
what's that Jin gonna do? Who cares?
Yeah.
Come on over, big boy. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
Like, we're all gonna, you know what? You want me? You want my daughter? We'll all live here together.
I'm like Rial, like little spooks and creaks in the night can't scare me given the world in which I live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take me away, Jin.
So
We'll ride
oh
the
my
wind
God.
together.
She gets another phone call from Iraj. Why are you still there?
Yeah.
And it's questionable whether this is Iraj, although it is
this
his
the one?
voice.
No, wait. Okay. Now there's 3 phone calls. The first one is kind of like, oh, we're breaking up a little, but it's
Yeah.
fine. And that's when he's like, I'll call my parents and have. There's the second one that's a little bit shorter, and it's pretty much, why are you still there?
Yeah.
The third one, the phone is off the hook.
Well, she leaves it off the hook, right? So when he calls and says, "Why are you still there?" There's a knock at the door.
Oh, that's right.
And it's all staticky with her husband. They're having this disconnect. So she just sets the phone down. She doesn't put it on the receiver. She sets it on the desk or the countertop or whatever. And she goes to the door where there's a knocking, looks out, no one.
And then something swoops in front of the eye hole. Or no. She goes outside. And then there's that, for the first time, we kind of see this fabric thing is sort of
Hmm.
hiding at the crook of the door and
And
locks her out.
it zips into her house and locks her out. Um, it's such a good scare. Like it's such a good, uh, so creepy when that happens. You're like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
And it takes her a while to get this door open, but the door just opens on its own. And
No,
there's door.
Dorsa opens the door.
Oh yeah, Dorsa opens the door, but
And
there is
Dorsa's
that.
like, "What is up with you, mom?" But
But
she
it's a
goes
little bit
back to
like,
the
are you Dorsa?
I know. Well, we're not going to get to that. That I think is pretty much Dorsa. Like, because Dorsa, the
Okay,
look on that child's face is very confused.
you're
Like,
right. You're right.
why did you lock yourself out of the house, mom? But she
Yeah.
goes back to the phone, and this is where I'm like, that is not your husband,
No.
because it's like essentially like it's her husband's voice saying, "You're a terrible mom.
Yeah.
You're a selfish person."
You're a whore. You brought this
Yeah.
on yourself. You cannot protect Dorsa.
Yikes.
It's the terrible things, I think it makes me think back to, when we go back to the PTSD read on it, like they're really diving into the Jinn is all of the inner workings of your own mind, right? Because like earlier, remember when the older man dies upstairs and she's sitting outside as the
Yeah.
paramedics
Yeah. Yeah.
come, she says, if I was a real doctor, I think I could have saved him,
Yep.
which is a really horrible thing to say to yourself
Yeah.
because it wouldn't have mattered if you were still in med school,
Yeah.
like it,
Yeah.
um, and I think that's what the Jinn is taking what her husband says, the fact that
Yeah.
it's still the same phone, the same voice as her husband,
Yeah.
but it's the Jinn speaking to her, and it's in some ways probably the way she talks to herself.
It's her shadow self.
Yeah,
And that's the idea, is that this Jinn feeds off of fear,
yeah,
turmoil, anxiety,
mm-hmm,
and knows how to ratchet those things up by, taking whatever it is that you reject about yourself to say, no,
mm-hmm,
that's not me. I am X, Y, and Z, but I've had to reject these other things. And it goes,
mm-hmm,
oh yeah,
yeah.
maybe you are actually those things.
There's a scene or two scenes that actually happen between that phone call, that's really interesting. So that phone was off the hook for like at least a full day
I know,
before she
right?
picks it back up.
Yeah.
Um, but like when Dorsa opens the door after the cloaked figure jumped inside there, um, she's asking Dorsa, "Did you see anyone? Did you see a thing?" She's like, "Yeah, there's a lady. She comes all the time
Oh
when you're not around."
my God. Shade, baby girl.
But the real horrible thing is, Dorsa's like, she's really nice. She plays with me. She says,
Right?
"You can't look after me, but she can." And Shade says, "Dorsa, this is all in your head." And Dorsa's like, "But wait, you just said you saw her."
I know.
I was like,
I like,
Shade, your arguments are not holding up, my friend.
no, no.
You got
You're
dunked on by
asking the
an
wrong,
8-year-old.
you're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah.
Like, and she's so twist turned around each and every way that she doesn't understand that like her daughter could be a possible ally rather than an enemy. And she just,
Yes.
every action just keeps turning her against her, against her, against her. She's
Hmm.
like, all right, fine. We want to find the doll. We're going to find the doll in the most violent, angry way, to
Yeah.
which the daughter is now just like hiding under the bed, you
Yeah.
know, because mom's having an episode.
Yeah. They actually have a whole argument because mom's tearing open the living room saying you're not allowed in the living room because that's where the creepy man in the ceiling was.
Yeah.
But Dorsa like starts needling her about like, well, you're in there and blah blah blah, and then you did
Yeah.
this, and they get into an argument, and eventually Dorsa mutters, maybe that lady was right. And Shade smacks that girl,
Yeah.
and that girl fights fucking back.
She is biting and fighting. Oh my God.
Um,
And Shade's like, do you want an apple?
oh, are you
It's
still
nature.
mad at me?
It's nature's candy. You mad at me? You mad at mommy? Should we go look for your doll now?
Shade is struggling to parent.
Yeah.
Um, there's also, I think, one of the, that we get this really cool image of late at night, Shade is staying up with scissors as a weapon.
Oh yeah.
Like huge scissors. But she also has this vision of seeing Dorsa sitting in the chair that the older man was sitting
Yeah.
in, her face contorted in fear. Think the first girl's body that they find in the ring,
Yeah.
like
Like her
that kind
eyes
of like
are all white. Yeah,
Yes.
her eyes are all white, looking up. There's like moonlight coming in through the hole in the ceiling.
Yeah. And
And
the djinn floats in front of her, and it's a big jump scare at the camera, sort of thing.
God. Well,
Uh,
that's when she says, "No, take me instead."
yes.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
The
um,
djinn's like, "All right."
okay, we can do it.
So what? And immediately the next day, she finds her daughter's doll.
Yeah,
It's been ripped up.
first she in this movie again is playing with, is the djinn real or is the djinn in your head? Is there a logical
Mm-hmm.
explanation for the djinn? And is finding a logical explanation the correct way to manage it?
Yeah.
And I would argue no, that the movie is telling you you don't have to believe in the djinn, but you certainly cannot argue your way out of its
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
And we see the fabric, which we've seen several times, whipping past a window.
Sort of. Yeah.
But in this case, what it is it's the tarp has come loose on top of the building and is
Right.
flapping down by her window.
Yeah.
And so she goes up to the roof of the building. I love that when she wants to go look for a thing upstairs, she will.
Right.
But when her daughter wants to, no. Looking down into the rubble of that upstairs apartment is her medical textbook, just pages flipping in the wind.
But she doesn't see that.
Oh, she doesn't notice it?
I don't think so.
Because she's
Or
looking.
does she?
Yeah, because
I mean, it seems kind of impossible, right?
I think well, it's a hole in the roof. Like that
Yeah.
apartment is exposed to the elements. I think she sees it because what she does is like, wait a minute,
Oh, then she
that
goes
book
to
is
look in.
locked
Yes,
in
you're right.
my
You're right.
desk.
Yeah.
So she runs back downstairs, gets the key, unlocks the desk where that book is supposed to be. And inside
That's where
is
you're right.
Dorsa's doll Kimia torn into like C3PO, right? Like
Yeah.
all of its
Yeah.
limbs and head torn off or whatever.
And of course, Dorsa has to walk in that moment. She's like, "You killed Camilla." Okay.
Child.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. You need to just go lay down. And when you get up, mommy's a doctor. Mommy's gonna fix Kimia. And sure enough, she brings out that fucking duct tape, not the masking tape.
unbelievable.
I don't think that masking tape's not gonna fix that
I'm like,
doll.
just throw that doll into a tote bag, into
Yeah.
your BBC fundraising tote bag, get in the car and get the fuck out. But Dorsa's fever is gone after she tapes the doll back together, but there's an air raid siren. Okay, we'll
Oh
just
my
do this one
God.
last time.
Yeah, we gotta do this one. And now they're by themselves. But now wait, no, now we need our coats because we're gonna leave. And oh, I'll be right behind you. No, girl.
I hate the setups, but I love the punchlines in this
Oh,
movie. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
and it's like the setup to get to the scare is so tedious.
Yeah.
Oh, she forgot her coat. Like, you don't need your fucking coat. It's a goddamn air raid.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, it's
And also it's like you are acted like you're being hunted.
yeah.
One room away is not an acceptable excuse anymore. Like I'm talking like, okay, all right, baby doll, we're gonna hold hands for the rest of the like until we leave Tehran. You are not to let go of my hand.
Yeah.
You're not to be out of my sight. You're not to let go of my, like none of this. Like we're just gonna go check in the other room. None of this. I'm just gonna grab a sweater. I'm just gonna go check and see if the faucets are turned on. No, like
Mm-hmm.
and frustration
Yeah.
because of course we get a switcheroo where all of a
Yeah.
sudden she's like, "Oh, there's my daughter. My daughter's right here. She's wearing a blue coat. Let's go down into the basement." But what? Why do I hear my daughter's voice yelling out "Mama" upstairs, even though this child doppelganger that flinches at the light is
Uh-huh.
with me? What could possibly be happening?
It is very confusing, and I think too intentionally so, of like which is which. Because when
That's yeah,
I do love that effect because we never see Dorsa's face in the downstairs basement.
yeah,
Like it's blurred.
yeah,
And when she shines the light, like, wait, who are you? The girl covers her
yeah.
face with the doll. And so it's really great. So she runs her ass back upstairs. There's Dorsa under the bed in her blue coat, hood over her head, and she's trying to pull her.
And she's like, "I'm being pulled," and she's pulling on Dorsa, but Dorsa's hoodie comes off, and it is nothing but teeth.
It is a tooth monster. Fucking
Tooth
A.
monster.
Chef's kiss. A plus. Love a surreal scare.
I
So
know,
good.
right? Yeah.
And just it's very
She's
like,
like,
what the fuck?
yeah,
Runs her ass back downstairs. There's Dorsa with a bloody nose because when she had ditched that downstairs Dorsa, thinking that's the Jinn, she had like kicked her in the face down the
I
stairs
know,
to run
right? Yeah.
away. And of
Dorsa's
course,
like, Ma, Dorsa's pissed.
yeah,
Dorsa's
she's like,
like,
why
I'm
the
gonna
fuck?
go with the crazy fabric lady. She's at least nice to me.
Yeah. And then Shade gets her calm enough to leave when suddenly the whole basement just floods with that big black and white patterned sheet.
This is kind of interesting
I
because
love that. Yeah.
because to me it's made very kind of the metaphor is pretty explicit in that now she's like in a fabric maze and this
Yes.
black and white fabric, and it's kind of she has to rip through the fabric in order to escape, and that seems to break the spell, which is also kind of referencing the sort of the headscarf covering the under the shadow
Uh-huh. Yeah, literally. Yeah.
of this sort of oppressive thing that must be this arbitrary thing that must be obeyed at all times. Because at one point I love there's a moment where after she gets out of jail and they've given her the all black traditional very orthodox conservative version, she catches her reflection in the mirror and she flinches. She's like, oh Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
doesn't say Jesus, but
Yeah.
she's like, oh my God, because that that's the shadow version of herself.
Yeah.
She has to rip through that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she rips through that and it turns into mud.
Yes.
This is where I was like, okay, when that 39-pound girl
Uh-huh. Pulls her
pulls
to
her
safety.
mother, I was like, I don't this
No.
we got to wrap it up here, folks.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
that girl ain't pulling mom. I
No.
know, I know what we got to get through, but I question the logic of what's happening right now.
That Dorsa could even have the strength to do this, let alone just the wherewithal. Like this is one of the most useless
Yeah,
children I've ever seen in a film, and it
yeah,
it is hard to believe that she is doing that. And also, to Dorsa's credit, like, kind of fuck you, mom. Like you just
yeah,
kicked me down these
yeah,
stairs.
yeah.
But they
But Dorsa does. She pulls mom to safety. Mom, and then like it's this is where kind of CGI I think is a boon and a curse
yeah,
to independent filmmakers, because things that seem really cool, like it can seemingly fix with no problem. Oh, we'll just make a pit of mud and but then like there's no residue, there's no like you can feel the CGI-ness of it
yeah, yeah,
as opposed to the like practical like mess,
yes,
because
yeah,
she's like all of a sudden she's just out of the mud. She's in the
yeah,
mud, she's out of the
yeah,
mud. Easy cleanup,
yep,
easy to fix it in post, but it does have that sort of like, okay, well, a problem easily made is a problem easily solved.
yeah. They get into the garage. She, of course,
And
can't
listen,
get the
at least
garage
finally
door
we're
open.
getting the fuck out of this apartment
Yeah.
complex.
They have to, like, they just back straight out of it, crashing through the door that
Uh-huh.
is locked shut. Ha 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 ha. Symbolism
I know.
breaking through. And,
Yeah. Chekhov's open gate
yeah,
that she's like, fuck this.
check
And she
this.
gets her, at least she gets it. She's like, get in the front seat, backs out. Last three shots in this film.
Yeah. They're in the, they're on the road. Kimmy or Dorsa's in the front seat. We see a shot of the two of them in the front seat driving to Granny's
Through the
house.
countryside. Yep.
Then a shot of Kimia, the doll, in the back seat without a head.
Yep. The
Then
head is lying
and then a
because,
shot of the stairwell
yep.
back in the Tehran apartment in the basement. The head is lying there. And then finally a shot of the medical book flipping open in the wind of the open roofed building where the tarp had come off back in Tehran. The Jinn still has their pieces of their beloved belongings, so it will always follow them. just like PTSD.
Yep.
Yeah.
No
Uh,
closure.
no closure, no nothing, no sense of, yeah. It is similar to way a lot of horror movies kind of end, like, but this doesn't leave it. Oh, like I think a horror movie typically ends with a sense of there's a whole other story to follow here.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
this
yeah.
isn't. There's not action in this movie. It is literary. It is
Yeah.
plotting and beautiful and art housey. So I really have a hard time imagining what a follow up film would be like for this movie.
I wanted them to be like haunted by the Jinn at grandma's house,
I guess I would watch that. I'm
you
like, I
know?
can't watch another hour and a half of
Of
Shade not understanding what she's dealing with.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would watch a follow up to this that is a lot more like From Dusk Till Dawn, where she's like, okay, no, we are arming up with whatever our
The
equivalent of holy
yeah.
water is,
Yeah,
put it
yeah,
in
yeah,
a,
yeah, yeah.
like, she and daughter become super team
Take
of
on
like
yeah, yeah.
the
We had
Jinn
yeah,
hunters.
the daughter wises up, she wises up. They're
Yeah.
out. They become Ghostbusters essentially.
All of our art house listeners probably just
Are like,
deleted this episode.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, shall we rate this movie?
Yes, let's.
All right, how approachable is this film if you are horror film averse on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being like, don't go near it, I would not recommend this for you. 10 being, I would recommend that you could watch this movie no problem. I would give Under the Shadow like 6 out of 10 Jane Fonda workout knockoff tapes. I don't know. It's got enough like good solid jump scares and creepy visuals to kind of throw you off your game. I will say that I will repeat, I think this is an art house film more than a horror film. It uses its horror devices to really good effect. So I think if you can watch an art house, like a dark art house movie that deals with PTSD, religious misogyny, gaslighting, bad parenting, um,
The
you know, uh,
oppressive state,
yes.
neighbors, the spies. Yeah, the whole thing.
And that the scares, I think they're really effective and good. I jumped in my seat. I think they're really startling. I think they're really haunting. Um,
But it's
but I
pretty
think it
bloodless.
matters
It's
whether
more
it's
of
a
a ooh
horror
rather
movie. Yeah.
than like headless bodies flying at the camera kind of shit.
But I'll still just say 6 out of 10 in terms of approachability. Like I think it's good and scary, but I don't know. I think you probably watch it. I think we're good. As a horror film, Cecil, how do you rate this movie?
As a horror film, this one's pretty darn solid in that it's just the thing of having to contend with what is the supernatural scare and what is just scary because of the world that they're in.
Yeah.
And I think this walks that tightrope pretty well. It gets a while to get going,
Uh-huh.
like it really doesn't get into the scary bits up
Yeah.
until like the last 20 minutes of this film.
Yeah.
So that slow burn the pot takes a long time to boil, is what I'm saying.
It
So for that
absolutely.
reason, I'm going to mark it down just a little bit because we got to get through a lot of stuff in the beginning. So I would say 4 out of 10 headless dolls
Yeah.
because you use painter's tape to
Yeah.
attach them.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's figure out what movie we will watch next. You have a scare die. I have a style die. We'll roll those up, see what movie matches those two things. Cecil, if you on your scare die, if you roll a 1, our next movie scare is isolation. 2, a werewolf. 3, aquatic. 4, a bad mom or bad dad. 5, a cult is the scare. Or 6, end of the world. What's our scare gonna be?
2.
Oh, we just knocked that werewolf out
And
right away. Getting
we we
right on
we
it.
we summon a werewolf, we conjure a werewolf.
All right. So, I'm gonna roll our style die. If I roll a 1 on our style die, it has to be a movie from the Southern Hemisphere. If I roll a 2, it's a wild card, whatever werewolf movie we want. Werewolf movie we want. 3, a black and white movie. 4, a cult film, meaning a cult following. 5, something from the 1970s. Or 6, first 3 episodes will bring back our TV show watching. All right, so let's see what we got here. I got a 2, wild card, werewolf. We can just go nuts and pick a werewolf movie that we want to watch. Um, Awesome. All right, so I picked three, you picked three, and then I feel like we can either pick one out of these six or roll a die and take one of those.
Well, I
Tell
think
me.
we should all we roll the die usually,
Oh
right?
yeah, we do roll the die, don't we? Well, tell me what you put on here, Cecil.
Okay. Let me sorry, getting up my little descriptions here.
Oh yeah.
So let's see. The first one I put on now these are three werewolf movies that I have never seen.
Ah.
Because honestly, you put the ones you put on there, I was like, seeing it, those are the ones I like. So
Uh-huh.
I was like, you know what? Let's try something new. So I can't vouch for quality, but I've always kind of been interested in these. The
Yeah.
first one is called Wolfen from 1981. New York City police investigator is trying to solve a series of grisly deaths in which the victims have seemingly been maimed by feral animals. I bet it's a werewolf. But it seems very like 80s New York City, the Bronx kind of movie, which is always kind of fun.
Yeah.
The other one I picked is The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which is from 2020. And this one is like more horror comedy. Stressed out police officer struggles not to give into the paranoia that grips his small mountain town as bodies turn up at each full moon. So like maybe like sort of horror comedy police procedural kind of thing. Seems
Uh-huh.
kind of interesting.
Yep.
And we have a classic Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf from 1985. I've only ever seen the first Howling. The show, it's the only one I had seen before this, but the
Uh-huh.
Howling 2 has Christopher Lee in it. And woof, Your Sister is a Werewolf is the tagline. No, even in the title, sure, why not?
Oh, and Christopher Lee. Oh, that sounds delightful. Those all sound really good. I've been curious about Wolf of Snow Hollow. I didn't know anything about Wolfen or Howling 2. I have not seen those. These three movies that I picked, I have not seen, although I think they are classics. At least the first two, I think, are.
Yeah.
American Werewolf in London. Never seen
Yep.
it. This is a John Landis joint.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah,
It kind of set the bar for practical effects.
yeah. Um, let's see here. I've also got The Company of Wolves, another
Yes.
1980s uh kind of art housey sort of feature, right?
Like like classy. It's got Angela Lansbury as the quintessential grandma
Uh-huh.
telling stories about wolves. Like I think soundtrack by Tangerine Dream.
Oh, sure.
Very high 80s fantasy.
Yeah, I just know that there's like a still photo that always attracts me that is like a fancy high tea sort of thing with a bunch of wolves sitting around in like
Yeah.
Victorian garb or something like that.
Yes,
Uh,
high fantasy horror.
and then the other one is Trick or Treat from
Which
2007.
I've seen Trick or Treat, but I don't remember a werewolf being up in there.
I know there's a werewolf in there. I take it
Okay.
back. I have seen this movie. It's just been a while.
Yeah,
And
same.
it was
I
long
remember.
before I watched horror movies, and I remember not liking it at all
Oh,
because it was too horror.
it was too well. Maybe now you've acclimated. We've
Yeah.
brought you into the fold.
Um, there's definitely a werewolf through line. There's like several stories happening in this
Yes.
movie. It's
Yeah, I
it's
remember it being an anthology, and it
anthology.
all kind of takes place on Halloween, right?
Yeah. And I believe this is Michael Dougherty, the director, is the same guy who did Krampus, I think, that we did for
Okay.
Patreon.
So
So it's a
definitely
little
like
bit like
twisted,
protect the
dark,
holiday.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
The spirit of the holiday is the most important thing. That's what I remember Trick or Treat being about. Like,
Nice.
don't disrespect Halloween as a
Oh, yeah,
holiday.
you're right. You're right. You're right.
Um,
Okay, I think we've got a good we've run the gamut of like kind of like listen, anything with Dame Angela Lansbury all the way to Howling to your sister is a werewolf.
I think it is. Whose turn is it to roll the die?
I think it might be your turn
All
actually.
right, I will roll the die. So we'll do it in the order we presented. 1, Wolf and 2, Wolf of Snow Hollow. 3, Howling 2. 4, American Werewolf in London. 5, The Company of Wolves. 6 is Trick or Treat. Let's see what we got here. I got a 3. That is Howling 2. Your sister's a werewolf.
Here we go, Jeffrey.
Yes. All right, let's just double check and make
Oh yeah,
sure.
yeah, please make sure that it's available to watch. It seems like
Um,
I think it is.
well, this gives me this is a German film? Wait, what's happening? Why is
What?
this in
Wait,
German? Just watch says it is available, but they list the title as Howling 2
Oh,
Stirba
I'm
Werewolf
getting the
Bitch.
same thing. Wild.
Okay, that's very weird. But it does say it's available to rent on Apple or watch on Tubi and Freevee with
Okay.
ads. So it looks like we're good to go. Uh Cecil, this looks fucking wild. Yes. All right. Well, we're gonna watch Howling 2, Your Sister's a Werewolf from 1985. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cecil, for talking with me. If y'all have thoughts on Under the Shadow or ideas for movies that you would have picked as your wild card werewolf film, let us know on Instagram at Random Horror 9 or over on Patreon, where we have public discussion threads for each episode, and you don't have to be a paying member to participate and comment on those. So watch Howling 2 with us this weekend. Come on back next Tuesday for a new episode. Have a restful night with no creepy boys handing you magical balls of cat hair or nothing. Oh.
Boom.